So how do you properly handle the constraints that are given to you as a network designer?
For me, first, I need to make sure they are actual constraint. So I want to make sure that usually because I speak with a stakeholder, and usually within companies, maybe there's some politicals, maybe there is some logistic or lobbies. So some one person maybe he will tell you about a constraint which will end up is not true. So first, I need to validate actually is this a real constraint or not. And then if I have a multiple constraint, usually I try to weight them and see how critical they are, how will they affect my solution. And based on that, sometimes some people we may think about constraint something like a risk. Then you need to start thinking: shall I accept this constraint? Shall I mitigate this constraint? Or shall I transfer it? Or maybe يعني, I try to convince the customer that maybe they can live without it or something. Some constraints are yeah, I have to accept if it's like more like a regulation or a standard.
Yeah.
As example, if I'm working with a hospital, I need to follow this, or if I'm working in US and I need to follow the SOC standard or so on. So this constraint is a must. I need to follow it. But if somebody told you, by the way, there's a constraint on budget which is we cannot exceed that amount, and this came from the technical team. Usually it would be better if I go and confirm this such constraint with somebody like the CFO or the procurement team, or the opposite. If one of the network team told me some constraint about the application, I may go and double check it from the application owner, and if it's a real constraint, then I try to adapt my design to match this constraint. If I want to give this application maybe a higher quality of service,
Mhm.
or allocate more bandwidth for it, or maybe the extreme, maybe I can create a dedicated traffic engineering tunnel or a VPN for this specific application. So usually one of my smart manager, one of the guys who really affect me a lot, and I'm still in contact with him. He was one of the manager I work with in France Telecom. Usually he used to say to us when we started our design career, usually technicality is not difficult. You will find a solution for
Mhm.
any problem. From technical perspective, you will find a solution. You are good, and technology have a lot of options. Usually the showstopper usually is how to operate it, how to build it, some business showstopper. But yeah, I still believe this is almost correct in most of the cases, not 100%, but usually you will find a solution technically. Yeah.
No, so I think there was something at the beginning of what you just said that is a big takeaway. And I'm trying to emphasize this because I'm not going to say the keyword that we just said. I'm not going to say hypercritical again for the 20th
Yeah.
time, right? This is just a big takeaway. You have to validate the constraints are actually constraints. And I give an example. Like I will go on with a customer, I'll go on site or I'll have a call, and they'll say, "Yeah, we need this. It's a requirement." And it's a technical person, and they're saying that they need the technical solution. Maybe it's sub-second failover, or maybe it's fast reroute. I don't know, whatever highly complex solution. And so I'm like, okay, well, why do you need this? Okay. And I will keep asking why until I get a valid response that says why they need it. Because a lot of times, and I hate to say this, a lot of times the technical folks, they don't know why they actually need it. They're just copying configurations, scripts, or whatever, or they weren't there when the design was created and they don't know the reasons why. Now, there probably is a reason why. I will say that too. I'll tell everyone that if you are brought into a network and you've never been in that network before, there's probably a reason why everything was done the way it was done in that network. You may not agree with it.
Yeah.
You may not like it, right? It may not make sense to you right now, but there's probably a reason.
100%. And this actually brought something to my mind. I believe I took a course recently about strategic thinking or something like that. And they were talking about or negotiation, sorry, and they were talking about the 5 whys. So usually, in order to, as you mentioned, to validate it, you start asking 5 whys. I need sub-second conversions. Why? Because of this application. Why this application needs sub-second requirement? Because it communicate with the people between East Coast and West Coast. What is the distance? So you start asking him why. It's not a way of bad attitude, or like you're a detective or something, but just you're trying to validate it. And maybe at the end, after doing all this uh, back and forth discussion. It's actually required 10 millisecond, not sub millisecond. Yeah, it's happened. Yeah.
Yeah, and you figure it out, right? And again, and
You
then
figure
it's
it out exactly.
documented, and then the company understands, right? That hey, this
Yeah,
is,
yeah.
and you can reduce that complexity a little, right? You can, I mean, the configuration of the devices bloats because of people don't know why things were done to begin with.